You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. Before this episode starts, I want to hop on and just remind folks that at the conclusion of this episode, I'll come back after the bell and share a little bit about where the beautiful Venus shows up in the house and home. This flower in the sky, this most beautiful planet to track its transits. It's a whole lifestyle, quite honestly. So stick around again after the bell, and we'll do a little bit deeper dive of where Venus shows up in your house. Thanks so much for listening to the Living Mandala podcast. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. My name is Aura. And the Living Mandala of the Planets series continues. I'm joined with Rachel Ruth Tate here. This episode's going to be all about Venus. Venus is the planet after Mercury. It's the second brightest object in the night sky after the moon. It's often seen as the morning star, the evening star. It's usually considered a twin to planet Earth, roughly the same size and shape. Venus, of course, rules over Friday. We'll get into that. And in languages deriving from Latin, the word for Friday often resembles the word Venus. Viernes, etc. There's a whole host of them that sort of resemble Venus. Of course, in classical Roman mythology, Venus is the goddess of love and beauty and is famous for the passions she can stir among the gods. So Venus, take it away, Rachel.
Venus is one of two what we call benefics. They bring us stuff that we like, Venus and then Jupiter, which we'll get into later. Venus is the lesser benefic, meaning she is what personally we enjoy, what pleases us, what is our aesthetic, what are we drawn to, what do we desire, what do we want to unify with, connect to? That is the Venusian. What do we like the sensation of? So where the Venus is placed in your chart tells you a little bit about what you like, how you love, your love language, if you will. And Venus is, she's the ruler of the signs Taurus and Libra. Taurus is our fixed earth sign, second sign in the zodiac, represented by the bull. And Libra is our seventh sign in the zodiac, represented by the scales. It is our cardinal air sign. Taurus is the hedonist. What do we like the taste of, the smell of, the soft sheets, the nice wine, the good taste in material items, right? We used crystals in one of the earlier episodes as an example of something Taurian. Venus is so bright in the sky. What is shiny? What are we attracted to? What do we like the look of? That is also very Libran. Libra is a cardinal air sign. So when our eyes are locked on, when we are looking through the air at something, what do we like the look of? What is our personal sense of style? And what music do we like? What sorts of conversation or song? Think about the way that the air actually carries a lot of those non-physical things which we enjoy, the vibration, right, through the air of sound. It's kind of something that transcends language even. Music is age old, and a lot of the things that we take pleasure in, they have those sensual components represented by Taurus and Libra. What I love, though, about Libra and her representation of the scales is that there's also a very deep component to Venus. Deep in the sense that what do scales represent? Balance, harmony, justice, equanimity. These are also things that can be very pleasurable, right? The unity and the peace, those things can be enjoyable, and also they are ideal. Venus represents the ideal, not just of the feminine, right? Not just of her Taurian received, not just of the earth goddess, mother, fecundity, fertility, but what is the ideal in terms of relation? Libra is inherently relational. The scales weigh two things. And often with Venus, we associate her with love and relationships. And those are not just with the self. those are also with others. So that unification of one and the other, right? Venus also, going to go into this, I should have gotten into this, I think, earlier, but Venus is the first planet whom has an angle, right? So when bodies make a connection along a 60-degree angle, that's an angle of the nature of Venus, and it serves to connect things at opportunity for unity or for a sharing of information. And sharing is caring, right? Sharing is one of our other wonderful fundamental human things. And when two planets can share in a harmonious way, collaboration is the key to growth, alchemy, and success.
Hear, hear. Very cool. In terms of the chakras, Venus is associated with the heart, which makes a lot of sense based on what you've just said. So there is a whole episode on the heart chakra that you can go back and listen to on the Living Mandala podcast with Dr. Barnard. So the heart chakra, the metal correspondence with Venus is copper. That's so interesting to me. Copper is one of those that, kind of has two versions of itself. It's got the shiny copper version that you're thinking of, but then it's also got the tarnished version that turns this beautiful blue-green color. And in the Color in the Living Mandala podcast series, one of the things that Nicole talked about was one of the ways that people used to get certain colors was by soaking copper plates in wine so that they could actually generate those blue-green colors to then decorate things and make them fabulous. So I just thought, oh, how Venusian.
Did you know copper is also naturally antibacterial and antimicrobial? It is why we used to have drinking fountains and spittoons made from brass.
Or watering bottle and, water bottles and things. Sure. And wearing copper on your wrist. There's something
anti-EMF.
Yeah, exactly. So copper, pretty magical. The day of the week is Friday. We mentioned that earlier. Friday, and it's most notable in some of those Latin languages. But Friday, the colors for Friday are in the kind of periwinkle blue family. But really anything that feels overtly feminine is perfectly appropriate for Friday. So I know I will often wear all kinds of colors as I try to link in with my inner Venus vibration on Fridays. I often will wear these really long, really beautiful pink and metal earrings just because they just feel so over the top feminine. And I will often wear them on Fridays for that reason.
And everyone loves Friday.
Right? It's Friday.
Yes.
Friday I'm in love. The Cure song. Okay, the rune that I've chosen, there are a few I think that would fit, but the one that I've really chosen is Fehu. It's linked with the planet Venus because it's all about movable wealth. It's all about cattle is kind of the original connotation. And so it taps in, I feel like, into that Taurus vibration of Venus quite nicely. In terms of the tarot deck, the Empress is associated with Venus, which, gosh, that makes a ton of sense, doesn't it? If you're into these things, the Empress card is the one to deep dive into for Venusian qualities. Okay, so talk to us about I jokingly said that the yoga pose for Venus to just be sex, but anyways, that you have other poses. Okay, so tell us about.
Said like such a Scorpio. Scorpio rules the genitals. It does.
Scorpio present.
Yeah. So for Venus, I have chosen Ustrasana, which is camel pose. Camel pose is taken by, you can look this up, but leaning back, grabbing the heels, the heart is forward, the hips are forward. It's also a big throat opener. And I chose this because Taurus is linked with and rules the throat. I mean, think about how we can enjoy things sensually through the mouth. That's very Taurian, enjoying things sensually through the mouth, tasting, specifically smell. And then Libra is associated with the lower back and the hips. And so in this pose, the throat is very open, very active. The hips are also very active in this pose, while it is a back bend, the lower back is what's most deeply associated with Libra. And think about the bum, like that top of the bum. This is very Libran. Lower back, those back dimples, top of the bum. What is one of the things that people often love? Booties. And it's not just male or female, right? So I'm talking to a Scorpio. I know I can say
I can hang.
but it's one of those parts of the body. Cancer, right? The chest, that's sort of inherently feminine. Men like women's chest specifically, but everyone likes a nice butt. That is because Libra is associated with the rear end, and we all enjoy it. Taurus, too. I mean, in the Sustrasana camel pose, you can really feel, I think, free and kind of like a heart warrior, like someone who is owning their own body in this pose and sharing it with confidence and enjoyment. It's a large pose, so you might have to work up to this camel pose, but so is knowing what you really want. It's kind of harder to do than one might imagine.
Cool. The yoga of Venus. Love it. In terms of the cycle, looking at the orbit vibration of Venus, this one is probably the most magical, and it's very famous. So when plotted geocentrically, that is, an Earth-centered perspective, there is a very clear pattern that Venus makes in the sky, and it is the pentagonal shape. It's where the pentagram comes from. It's very noticeable if you're into plotting these things, and it takes about 8 years to do a full cycle of Venus. And what's most interesting about this cycle isn't just the raw beauty of it. It's so beautiful, is that it is mirrored below on the Earth in the form of various plants. So actually, Rachel and I were just looking at this book I have called The Quadrivium. It's the 4 classical liberal arts of number, geometry, music, and cosmology. And the path of Venus is mirrored as above, so below on the Earth in the form of phyllotaxis. So, chopping open certain vegetables, pine cones, pineapples, certain flowers, you will see this almost exact shape as above, so below. It actually offers this really beautiful, indisputably beautiful pattern onto the Earth itself and into us by default. And so the nature of Venus, you can actually see it manifest in our natural world, whereas Mercury, that vibration is more like thoughts, words. It's like a zippier vibration. This one is a real imprintation vibration of life itself, of beauty, of tastiness, of flowers. And it is a pentagram. It's one of our sacred shapes as humans. This has been tracked and plotted since, man, it's the second brightest thing in the sky after the moon. We inherently would want to track this. Some cultures figured out the morning star, evening star, that it was the same, but there are other cultures that never connected those two dots. I'm thinking I'm not being very accurate here, shame on me, but see, this is where I'm airing out ideas and soundboarding for this book I'm writing. But there are other cultures on the planet that never connected those dots and kept them as separate planets or stars or whatever they categorize them as. So the invitation that I would offer, opportunity here would be to follow this orbit. There are entire cults built up that follow the path of Venus. There are many, 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 many priestess cults, rose cults that follow the path of Venus. And if this is in any way interesting to you, I'm not going to send you a specific direction. If you want to reach out to me, I would be glad to send you in a specific direction. But I would encourage you to follow this orbit and just see what's available to you. There are Venus star points that you can track, different places in the orbit of Venus. Venus does some interesting retrogrades throughout its orbit that sort of correspond interestingly to events here on Earth. Again, I can point you to some examples. There was a great example last summer with just all things Barbie and all things Venus retrograde that just sort of transpired before our very eyes on a big scale for such a personal planet. It was interesting to kind of watch all of that unfold. So that would be the invitation: is follow the path of Venus and find magical things in your life. Anything else to add about Venus orbit?
Well, everyone knows 40 days and 40 nights.
There you go.
Whether it be from the Bible or from Shakespeare,
Here's where it comes from.
Venus's retrograde period. It's why it's in Romeo and Juliet. I'm going to add here, too, that Venus's sign of exaltation is Pisces, which is the last sign in the zodiac ruled by Jupiter. We haven't gotten to Jupiter yet, but the idea of following an orbit and kind of doing one's own research and getting involved and receiving the wisdom of the planets, this is a very Jupiterian pursuit. And I love how Venus does her best work in that way. So if you are able to take this time and to unify things by virtue of watching, receiving that light, interpreting, internalizing, it's a very Piscean pursuit. And even the pose that I chose, grabbing of the heels, Pisces rules the feet. And so Venus following her orbit will bring you, I think, in a mystical Piscean way as well, even closer to understanding.
Love it. You're listening to the Living Mandala podcast. Okay, hey there, it's me again. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where Venus shows up in the physical house. So if Venus is the planet, of beauty and desire and, even money, aesthetics, this is going to show up in a number of different places. So first and foremost, think about your beauty supplies. So this could be hairbrushes, makeup brushes, the status of your beauty supplies. Do they need to be cleaned out? Is there anything that needs to be replenished there? In addition, you might think about your clothing. So, what's the status of your closet? Is it time to go through things? Is it time to, go pick up some new underwear or new lingerie or something like that? And so Venus can also show up in terms of our clothes and our aesthetics. You might also link Venus with, say, the bedroom. So, it could be just as simple as, a deep clean of the bedroom, make it a little bit more of an inspiring place. It could be a redecoration of your bedroom. You've come to realize that maybe you need a different color palette. You need to tone it down. Maybe it's time to zhuzh it up. So, the bedroom would be another place. In terms of, beautiful ideas, Venus could show up pretty easily in the art studio. Okay, it could show up if you have an art studio or a playroom or something like that in your home. Venus lives there as well. It could be your living room. If you're thinking, I'm thinking more of a Venus in Libra, but if you're someone like me who hosts salons and things of that nature, maybe the living room is an area where Venus manifests for you. It certainly does in my home. So those are some ideas to think about Venus and where this planet shows up in the house and home, maybe some ideas to, wake some of those areas up. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Living Mandala podcast. Until next time.